We are looking at Paranormal. This story currently sits at about 3,000 words. It is not as close to a working story as I would like. I don't necessarily think it's terrible, but I wouldn't put it in one of my top stories yet. I don't know that I'll get it there this moment, but my goal is to improve it and connect it a little more completely so that maybe on a third, fourth, or maybe even fifth pass of editing on this story, I can make something out of it. So let's see where we are, and then we'll kind of see where some changes might strengthen the story a little. Paranormal by Jay Wilburn. Lydia Jane had been dead longer than she'd been alive, but she still wasn't used to it. She often wondered as she wandered the halls that had been her estate in her living childhood if people who lived longer had an easier time at being dead. That wasn't the thing people talked to little girls about in her time. She wasn't sure if times had changed. It was hard to focus on the present without a body, eyes, or a sense of time. Lydia had never, ever seen another dead person in all her many years of haunting. At first, she thought it might be a dream, but she supposed that was just a silly hope. Then she hoped it might not all be a trick. There wasn't any such thing as ghosts. That's how it was supposed to be. But the afterlife was far too strange to be any trick, even for the best pranksters like her brothers. Alright, so add a little bit of detail there, and then we'll keep moving. Lydia rounded another corner, even though she could have passed right through it without a pause. It was easy to get lost as a ghost. She learned that quickly. And no one would come to help you when you were dead. Dead and disoriented inside some wall. Alright. She learned that soon after passing on. She paused at the top of a short flight of stairs. She couldn't tell if they were carpeted or if it was just a flaw in her unreliable vision. She waited. Lydia couldn't be sure this was the same spot. One place didn't connect to the other all the time like it did in the world of the living. Sunlight dazzled her and threatened to scatter her apart. She suffered through it. Light hurt in a way the living could not understand when they had eyes to close. Let's say eyelids. When they had eyelids to close whenever something was too bright. The sun settled on the wall and floor at just the perfect angle. Now the room was clear but made no sense to her. On one wall... Alright. On one wall, what Lydia Jane perceived as a painting showed three people. There was glass over it, which she saw as a strange way to display a painting. Wouldn't that damage it? It looked to be a portrait of a father, mother, and child. Lydia thought the child was a girl, but even at the right time of day, these were fine details for ghost eyes to focus upon. All right. As blurry as it was, the girl could be Lydia Jane herself. Let's say could have been. Could have been Lydia Jane herself. But she had no memory of sitting for any portrait. Maybe if she had gotten older before she died. Alright, now we'll add a little horror in here to kind of connect it to some of the later stuff that's going to happen. A single drop of brown ooze ran down from under the frame of the picture. Too brown to be blood. Something leaked. The sunlight flickered. It was somewhat like an object moving between the sun and her, causing a flutter of shadow. Lydia was not good at tracking quick motions in her current and eternal state. As the real world cleared up again in the light, there was no brown oozy leak anymore, as if being dead wasn't trouble enough. Lydia Jane still struggled. Let's say still had to combat her own imagination. Alright. Lydia had spent a long time following her mother around the house after she died. Okay, I need to transition this a little bit. She had been an imaginative child, but such a trait wasn't appreciated in her family. That'll be good. Alright, now we dive back into what was already in the first draft. Lydia had spent a long time following her mother around the house after she died. She cried out to her mother to hold her and help her. Over time, her mother's eyes darkened, her skin sagged, and her hair was always out of place. Lydia's father, brothers, and sisters all gave mother distance. It wasn't long before Lydia Jane wondered if all her crying might be driving her mother crazy. Her mother never really responded like she heard, but maybe ghost voices were the sort of thing that could still drive a grieving mother insane. Okay. Maybe ghost voices, let's say, of crying children. That makes it a little more sinister. Alright. Good deal. You've made it all the way to page 2. One day she went to apologize, but could never find her mother again. As a little ghost, she watched her brothers and sisters age, while Lydia could not. Even her baby brother grew into a young man she didn't recognize. She tried to cry out to her siblings and father like she'd done with her mother. Father never flinched. He aged, but only at his respectable pace. Alright, sometimes one of the boys or girls would turn suddenly with eyes wide, but they'd never respond to her calls for help. Time grew more slippery as it... I don't want to say slipped and slippery. Time grew more slippery as it sped by year after year. Sometimes Lydia thought that she missed entire years as she wandered the halls of the estate. In time, old adults who looked so much like her brothers and sisters sat around grand Christmas trees or at banquet tables. Her brattiest brother, then with gray hair and bald spots, kindly brushed another little girl's hair as she sat in his lap. "Why do you brush her so kindly when you pulled my hair so cruelly, James?" James never flinched, but the little girl turned about so quickly Lydia thought old James might have pulled her hair after all. The little girl hugged the old man tighter as her eyes searched the shadows along the edges of the room. Then even her old brothers and sisters were gone too. That's when the hallways changed. It didn't occur to Lydia Jane that the little girl in her old brother's lap, maybe his daughter, maybe even his granddaughter, might have seen her that day. Alright, love the no eyelids. Great visual in my head about what Lydia looks like. Thank you. I try to play around with the tropes a little bit, whether I'm writing about vampires or werewolves or ghosts or any of those kind of things, and try to imagine little details that make it a little bit different than the usual fare, even if you try to stick closely to what the trope is. Thank you, man. All right. It didn't occur to her, to Lydia Jane, until that moment by the leaking portrait. That's the little girl. Okay. As the sun hit the right spot, I don't need a comma there. All right. As the sun hit the right spot, she saw the room below her clearly. Lydia Jane had not been outside since 2 weeks before she died unknown years ago. But this room, the one revealed to her when the sun was just right, was not from her estate. She turned her view to the hall behind her and peered at the rooms through other doorways. This was not her home. Don't want to say estate twice. This was not her home. It was too small and filled with things she couldn't identify. "I'm in a different house," she admitted to herself for the first time. She didn't want to believe it because she didn't understand it. Had she drifted to another place, or now haunted the halls of strangers? Had they knocked down her estate and built this in its place? Lydia Jane giggled at the thought of being caught in a house like a bug in a jar. Hey, Zach, thanks for dropping in. I appreciate you guys being here. All right. She turned around to a voice. Okay, hold on. There's that sound again, like laughing. She turned around to a voice she did not recognize, but the light had changed enough that she lost herself in this house again. By the time she was aware of her surroundings... I'll say once more, because I already said again. Occasionally I have to use different words so people think I know what I'm doing. She judged herself to be in a kitchen. The icebox was wrong and hummed like an old drunk man. The light above her made her feel ill. It flickered in the most terrible rapid pattern of pale dead illumination. If she tried to stare at it, she felt herself coming apart. Sometimes she imagined she saw fan blades spinning over the top of that awful light. A woman opened the door to an oven and appeared to start cooking without lighting any fire. This can't be real, Lydia Jane said. The woman closed the oven with a bang and looked around. Kayla? Yes, Mom. The voice was distant, almost in another world from Lydia's sense of sound with no ears. She recognized the voice that had spoken from the stairs. Well, I can always spell that right while I'm here. From the stairs. They heard me giggle, Lydia said. The woman's eyes flicked in her direction, but then she moved quickly out of the kitchen. Okay. When the living moved too fast, Lydia saw them in still flashes. Gaps between their movements made them appear to disappear. The woman was gone in 4 still flashes. Then the hulking figure hunkered down to Lydia's level. She perceived the world from what had been her young height in life. Sometimes she tried to fly, but never succeeded. Hold on. Then a hulking figure hunkered down to Lydia's level. She tried to recoil, but had no muscles to respond to such a wave of fear. All right. She perceived the world from what had been her young height in life. Sometimes she tried to fly, but never succeeded. As the awful face in front of her... Let me pull this into another paragraph. I don't know if that's not going to work, but I may have to cut some of this out anyway. As the awful face in front of the little girl ghost leered with too many teeth, she backed away until she thought she might vanish into the kitchen wall. She wanted to get away from this thing. Its face was streaked in scarlet runnels. It dripped as it rushed toward her in one smooth motion. This could not be her imagination. She was not capable of inventing this horror. Okay. Like that. Alright. Lydia tried to scream but had no throat to do so. It was the first time she'd tried such a thing in all these years of being dead, and she failed. The thing was gone. The kitchen was gone. She found herself lost in someone else's hallways. Did you see her too? The voice was small but closer. Sounded like the same world. It was the voice the woman from the kitchen called Kayla. Do you see me now, Kayla? Lydia Jane asked. The person she could not yet see. There we go. Another voice, deeper, guttural, inhuman, said, I'm the one who brought you here. Lydia spun about too quickly and nearly flung herself into a wall. She tried to back away. Then the awful voice was behind her. You'll be here as long as I need you, and not a moment longer, I promise. She spun again and caught a glimpse of slanted eyes like two gashes in the darkness. Somehow, let me put a comma there. Somehow they glowed with darkness. All right. She stumbled through a door and found herself in a bedroom. The sunlight from the window stung her and fractured her view of the world. For one mad moment, she thought, this is how flies see the world. There was no way she could know that, but she felt it was true. Help me, Kayla said. Even nearer than before. All right. Lydia Jane turned her view into the terrible sunlight. For a moment and no more, she saw the shape of a girl, a little older than herself, the last time she was a living thing. This girl was a figure in shadow compared to the blazing light. She sat against the wall in a pocket below the streaming sun, hugging her knees to her chest. Lydia Jane thought of the glass covered, that'll need to be a hyphenated word, of the glass covered painting. I'll say portrait. We don't need to keep calling it a painting. That's just what she thought it was. Lydia Jane thought of the glass covered portrait of a family and how the wall bled for a moment before the bloody thing first revealed itself. All right. Moving right along. Kayla, Lydia asked. Her voice seemed to echo into infinity, calling Kayla over and over. The sun was really doing a number on her. Lydia couldn't stay in here much longer. You can see me, Kayla asked. It was the strangest thing Lydia could imagine being asked. What? Have you seen my mother? Lydia melted away in the sun and didn't know anything until she found herself in that strange kitchen again. It might have been the right time of day because the dark kitchen seemed so very clear to her. How much time was passing between her awarenesses was a mystery to her. It doesn't want to let me say awarenesses, but I'm going to say it anyway. How much time was passing between her awarenesses was a mystery to her. It felt like some, but could have been a lot. Kayla, Lydia asked the empty room, are you still there? You will all be here until I am done with you, the terrible voice said behind her. Then something she thought she'd never experience again happened. She felt a hand upon a shoulder she no longer had. It was wet and cold. The nails, or maybe they were claws, dug into flesh that no longer existed. She felt cold breath on her non-existent neck. All right. And skin that had long ago rotted. Skin that had rotted away long ago, prickled with goosebumps. Alright, there we go. That's a good detail, I think. Alright, Lydia tore away from the monster's grasp. She expected to be shredded, but she was fully a ghost again as she tumbled through a house she had trouble seeing. In here, the voice was so very quiet, but Lydia Jane followed as best she could. Let me have her do a couple things. She passed through a table, a lamp, and a sofa. without pause. Then she passed through a door before she realized it was there. Get down and stay quiet. Lydia Jane knew how to stay quiet, but she'd not so much as crouched since the day she died, and she was starting to believe that might have been centuries ago. Then a hand took hold of her hand. A hand took hold of her fingers. I don't want to say hand twice. Then a hand took hold of her fingers that Lydia couldn't believe she still had. This hand was warm and clawless, but she still tried to pull away. No, please, he's still out there. Sit with me. Lydia Jane allowed herself to be pulled and sat down next to Kayla in the dark closet under the coats. The relief of sitting down after all this time was exquisite. It wasn't that she'd felt tired. She hadn't felt anything that she remembered, but sitting down was so intense she nearly drifted into the floor before Kayla pulled her back up level. Lydia saw the other girl's eyes, hair, mouth, and shoulders, but couldn't hold on to any details or color. Are you like me? Lydia asked. Kayla looked at the inside of the closet door and back at Lydia. It was so strange to be seen. I guess so. Did you die? I did. I think it was a long time ago, but I don't know. I'm Lydia Jane. Kayla nodded. Did you die here? I don't know where here is. I was in a different house with my family and got sick. I didn't get better. I was brought here by him. Kayla motioned with her head toward the closet door as if that explained everything. Did he bring you here too? I don't know where here is. I don't know who he is. Keep it down, Kayla said. Lydia didn't understand what that meant. Have you seen my mother? He keeps us apart. I've seen a woman. She called your name. Where was she? All right, I'm going to put an exclamation point, make it sound like... all right, I'll say Kayla was the one who raised her voice. The door tore open, and the closet flooded with painful light. Let me put light instead of lake. Flooded with painful light. Kayla screamed, and Lydia tried again to do the same, but failed once more. The bloody face and the misshapen creature showed all its teeth. Found you. Everything was gone until Lydia found herself in the kitchen. The woman was there again. She tried to open the oven over and over, but her hand kept passing through the handle. All right. Was she a ghost too? Had she been a ghost the first time Lydia saw her? Are you Kayla's mom? The woman gave out a shriek and turned on Lydia. Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm Lydia Jane, and I have no idea. Kayla is looking for her mom, and something terrible is going on here. Why are we here? The woman asked. Lydia tried to shake her head, but nothing happened. Can you hold my hand? I haven't been able to touch anything. Not since... And of course we get cut off here. Lydia wasn't sure if that was the end of his sentence. She still felt weird about interrupting adults. Will you try to hold my hand? I need to find Kayla and her mother. How do you know my Kayla? I think she's a ghost like me, Lydia said. The most amazing thing happened then. The woman cried. Real tears fell from her colorless face to the floor of the kitchen. They even caught the light as they fell like real raindrops. She's not dead, Lydia thought. But then the woman took Lydia's hand. Being a ghost and still new to touch, Lydia startled. It felt like she was all hand, but she moved from the kitchen, feeling Kayla's mom's fingers folded between hers. They approached the closet. Lydia reached for the knob, but there was no hand to grasp it. She giggled to herself. I know that laugh, Kayla's mom said. How long have you been around us? Lydia, Kayla called from upstairs. Is that you? Kayla, the girl's mom released Lydia's hand and Lydia Jane went back to incorporeal. Wait for me. But Kayla's mother moved faster than Lydia could track. Then the knob to the closet door turned. It flung open hard enough to wave the coats inside. The bloody face leaned out with excruciating slowness compared to the speed of the opening door. They aren't real, it growled to her. You made them up to keep from being so lonely. Lydia looked for the stairs but couldn't see them. She turned because she seemed to be facing a blind corner. The awful face tracked in front of the little ghost. What are you? She demanded. He gave a hissing laugh that brought blood bubbles from between the awful teeth. Maybe I'm not real either. Maybe I made you up to lure them in here. Let's do an or here. Or maybe I made you up. He reached out a rail-thin black leathery arm, and Kayla felt her heart for the first time in forever as he started to crush it. Lydia let out a groan, but there was nowhere to dispose of the pain. She was now all heart, and everything hurt too much to be real. Okay, put a comma there. This story is a little better than I thought it was when I came back to it. I'm kind of liking it more than I thought when I first drafted it last week. Before she died years ago, her mother came to Lydia Jane's sickbed every night to pray for healing and mercy. In a small voice, her mother had added a call for God's will to be done. That line scared Lydia, partly because it would excuse God for not healing, partly because it sounded so much like her mother didn't mean it. After she died, Lydia tried her best to pray to God to either take her all the way to heaven or to finish erasing her from existence. She had no hands to fold, but she'd said the words. She prayed everything except the call for God's will to be done. No excuses this time. Now she prayed again for God's mercy, but the pain persisted as this terrible creature hissed his wet laugh into her ghostly face. You didn't die sick, girl. You died bloody. And there is no God here but me. All right. Something pushed her, and Lydia's heart popped free of his grip. The pain persisted and pulsed outward until she felt every fiber of her body she no longer had. Kayla took one hand, and Kayla's mother took the other, dragging Lydia toward a front door fractured in the afternoon sunlight. They take you to be destroyed, the creature growled. They aren't real. What's he saying? Kayla asked. Just keep going through the door like it isn't there, Kayla's mom ordered. But it is there. Hey, Ron, thanks for dropping in, man. Appreciate you being a part of it. All right, Kayla took one hand and Kayla's mother took the other. They'd take you to be destroyed. But it is there, the creature roared from the edge of the spilling light that Lydia Jane felt over her entire body. And you can't leave until I'm done with you. I'll just bring you back. They did crash through the front door of the house. It felt solid and it hurt, but they passed through it until sunlight scattered them, and Lydia Jane could no longer feel their hands. Time passed. It felt like a lot, but she couldn't be sure. Lydia Jane blinked herself back to the present, actually blinked. She felt her face with real hands. She felt her clothes and remembered the outfit from life. Lydia Jane ran out into a hallway she did not recognize. It wasn't the estate. It wasn't the strange house either. It was large and full of hallways. I want to say full of passages, because we already said hallways. Full of passages. All right. Did I dream it all? Her voice actually echoed back at her like a natural thing. She dared to hope and ran down one of the empty halls. Mother, I had the worst dream. That wouldn't be a question mark at the end of dream. All right. Lydia, it was Kayla's voice, like from another world too far away to reach. Kayla, where are you? What is this place? I don't know. I can't find my mother. Can you help me? A chill traveled over Lydia Jane's skin like a real thing. Lydia, are you coming? The voice was further away. Lydia backed into a wall. It was a solid thing. Okay, let's say, I've said thing a bunch of times. Let's say surface this time. It was a solid surface. But she felt herself sinking into it. She pulled away and tried to touch the wall with her new hand. It was solid. It was, say, it was firm, but she could press her fingers into it just like before. As she held her hand up, she could see details of the wall and floor through it. It was still there, she could feel it, but it was fading from her sight. I found you, the other voice growled, much closer than Kayla's. Much closer than Kayla's. It took a while, but I did, and we're all together again, closer to finished. Let's do this again. What do you mean? Lydia Jane asked. The monster did not answer, not even with his hissing, bloody laugh. At least he did not show his awful face this time. Lydia Jane started wandering and searching the halls. As she did, her form faded. Let's put a comma there. Her form faded, and she forgot what it was like to have a body for a little while. She started to call a name, but then couldn't remember which one she was going to say. Shapes moved within the shadows, and Lydia Jane wondered if there was anyone here. This was not the estate she'd lived in during life. Something was wrong. Lydia Jane had been dead much longer than she'd been alive, but she still wasn't used to it. Alright, I think that's better than I remember it being, and it still needs something else. I think there may need to be... Yeah, I don't like doing that in every story, like having a loop every time, because it can be a little bit of a cheat. I think it works okay for this concept, but I'm not sure what to add. I think you can mess up a story by trying to add too much, like give another scene, even possibly give too much more detail that may give something away. But it does feel like maybe there's like one or two scenes missing, like somewhere between some of the actions there needs to be something else going on, but I'm not sure where to put that. So that's probably something to be solved in maybe edit 3 or 4. Less is always more, Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah, I do think so. One temptation with writing, and one that I've worked pretty hard to fight, is making sure to trust the audience. So the temptation is to not trust the audience and to like try to give them too much. Like you'll say, I need to explain this more, or they're not going to get it. Now it is possible to not explain enough and just have the people lost, but it's also possible to leave things ambiguous and give just enough to where readers can fill in things themselves. And also, I think that's true if like there's a message in the story, or like a character has a certain viewpoint. If you try to explain that too explicitly, it comes off as preaching, and it really undermines the story. It's a lack of trust in the audience that they can get it and draw their own conclusions, even if they disagree with what you think or what the character thinks. So that's my little ghost story for today.